Alright guys, so this is part 2 of our framing video, and it's pretty much going over everything that we've gone through before. And as you can see here, I'm measuring angles, I'm measuring points, but something to keep in mind here is in the frame itself you could take a ruler or your pencil, and you can actually find, you can find the middle of the frame, you can find these different plumb lines, and actually take your ruler and just take, like, if you're measuring with that ruler, like, say you're like, oh, okay, at what point does the top of the seashell cross the frame? You can take your ruler, and on your drawing you can actually trace that line across the drawing. That gives you a really good reference for not only the seashell, but see where that ruler cuts across the bottle, and even the tape. So whenever you bring your ruler across to find, like, central points or horizontal lines, or even the angles here, I want to see, those measurements. I want to see where you take that ruler and start to find your angles, but also kind of your geographical points in the frame itself. So you can see I've taken a horizontal across to measure where the top of my shell is, and then I've measured the middle, which the bottle pretty much hits. But then from those points, I then start to find these angles as to where the different points of the objects, what types of angles they make with each other. So it's really a good idea to set in a foundational horizontal or vertical, wherever that may be. Like where does the top of the bottle hit across? Where does the outermost edge of the shell, is it touching the frame? Isn't it? So really use your frame as your points of reference and measure it out. Make the lines. Every type of measurement that you make, I want to see an angle or horizontal or vertical on the drawing itself. Now, something else that's really interesting is the circular shape here. You're actually able to measure that very easily by where these points intersect other objects. So if you're starting on your drawing, do your foundational kind of measurements, as soon as you set in, you're confident with where you placed one object. By using that one object that you've set in, you can start to really measure out everything else. So say, for example, you measure the bottle pretty well inside the frame and on your drawing. From just where that bottle sits, you can start to then more or less accurately see where the point of that tape crosses. Where does it cross the shell? So you're kind of, after you lay in the outlines of one of the objects, you're actually able to measure that out and find the intersections of all the other ones. So for me, I had a slightly different angle from what you guys are looking at. But after I was able to lay in the seashell, actually, and I found where it lied in the frame, and I was able to angle and measure where its points come from some of its outermost points, I was able to then start to build where that bottle was, and then once that bottle was set in, I was able to build off that and start to lay in where the top of the tape is. And by having the shell set in place already in the foreground, I was able to see exactly where these points of the round tape start to intersect the shell. So as you're building organically your drawings, start to use the objects you lay in to then measure out the rest. And so we were talking about focal points, and I just want to say that with the focal point of the drawing right now, you can see that I've really settled in to the top of this bottle here. And so based on some of the other line weights, and even where some of my measurements go, this is one of the focal point of this drawing is probably there first, and then since I really spent some time on some of this here, it goes from here to here, and I've actually laid in the wire in the background and that shadow, and so it makes this kind of pyramidal or circular kind of directional force here. So by actually having this frame set up, you're actually it's really not an easy way to then measure out where your points are. And so I want to see, wherever you use a ruler or your pencil and you start doing the sighting and measuring that we talk about, I want to see these lines. I want to see these measurements. If you need to do like little tick marks, from when you're measuring, leave those in there. I want to see the architecture of your drawing. And so really use the visual cues that this frame gives you to then set in some of these verticals and horizontals to really see where the edges of these objects line up in relation to your frame. So the outside edge of this bottle is, I would say, probably a third of the way into the frame. So you can use that on your drawing. If you measure in a third, that'll give you a nice beginning reference point for that vertical. So we kind of have two things going on here. One is framing and going and measuring, again, like we were doing in the other videos. But then also, as you're drawing, you can start to set in your focal points. Where do you want to control someone's eye by providing a little bit more precision and a little bit darker areas, darker line weight, heavier line weight? You can start to really control, and we're not even shading yet, but you can really start to cause these compositional forces around the drawing by just the weight of your lines and a little bit more precision in certain areas. But I also want to see the architecture of your drawing. And just in case you're wondering, I'm using a mechanical pencil, but for these exercises, since it's all focused on contour and measurement, probably a B pencil, HB, your H pencil, or the mechanical one, to give you a lighter, more flexible line so that you can really start to lay in the proper measurements. If you want to leave some of your wrong contours in the drawing, you can leave them in there as long as you go back in and correct them. So I know some people will want to erase, and that's fine if you do, but sometimes it's really instructive to leave in the contours that you thought were correct, but they're just kind of left as a ghost of information showing your progression. So your measuring lines, your tick marks, and any contours that are kind of an issue for you, like in mine, for example, I've left this here. See that? That shape of that shell is way off because I had to remeasure out. If you leave some of that in, it makes for a very complex drawing. So that's kind of framing the drawing, measuring again, but then like line weight and focal point are also some of the topics and techniques I want to see in these drawings.